Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Katie Koullas, CEO of Yellow Ladybugs. Welcome to our 2022 discussion on supporting neurodivergent students and their families in COVID times, which we are bringing to you with the support of the Department of Education and Training Victoria. This is a follow-up discussion to the one we hosted a year ago. And at that time, we took the opportunity to reflect on 2020 as the year of the pandemic and to bring autistic experiences to the forefront. We focused particularly on the impact of the pandemic to autistic children, both at home and at school. We discussed what we had learned and how we could apply these learnings to better support our community. We thought we were returning to normal. And I'm not sure what we all expected to be going through a year later, but we're so excited to bring the same panelists here today because it was another year of uncertainty. And I think that's the key word that I want to bring up today, uncertainty. So whether you're going through the after effects of the COVID pandemic or even currently going through that, or there's other uncertainties in your life, there's a lot of stress going on in the world, this will be relevant to you. So, as I said, I'm proud to bring back my panelists and reintroduce you to Amanda, Shadia, and Penny. So, Amanda, I'm so glad you're here today, also known as Autistic Pride Mama. Amanda's a late identified neurodivergent mother to autistic and otherwise neurodivergent teens. She's worked as a school psychologist for more than 20 years before moving into private practice as openly neurodivergent. Hi, Amanda.
Hey, hi, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. We've also got Shadia Hancock, who's an autistic advocate, amazing ambassador for Yellow Ladybugs, and a Bachelor of Speech Pathology student at Australian Catholic University. Hi, Shadia. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks, Katie. Great to be here.
And Penny Robinson, a well-known Yellow Ladybug ambassador, and is a lecturer of biostatistics and public health at Monash University. She's also an autistic advocate and gives occasional talks on her personal experience and is an ambassador of Yellow Ladybugs ICANN Network and Asperger's Vic. Welcome, Penny.
Thank you, Katie. I wear many different hats.
You really do, definitely. And welcome to you all. So that was a bit formal, and I said today I really want to make it more relaxed, informal, unmasked. So that's out of the way. Hopefully you'll see a bit more fluid discussion today. So let's begin. Okay, so really, I just wanted to find out how you're all going. It's another year of lockdowns and uncertainty, and I just thought we'd begin with finding out how it was for you.
Oh my goodness. So has it been only a year? Because we're in 2022 and the pandemic was the start of 2020.
Yeah, so I know it's the last year since we spoke.
Yeah, I know, but it seems
it feels like
it's been no time and 10 years. And so I think sort of explaining how it's been is one of the difficulties of autistic and neurodivergent people generally. Like how's it been? How are you going? It's like so broad.
Absolutely. That's a very good point.
So I guess I just wanted to say that because I can just say that it's been everything. It's just been everything. It's been hard.
Do you think the uncertainty of the situation has been particularly hard for you, or has it been something else?
Yeah, I guess there's the uncertainty, but there's been a lot of changes in the messaging to the community, to the Australian community, particularly, well, I'm just coming from a perspective of being in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia, where we have had the biggest lockdowns in the world somehow. How did we get that? So we've gone from being so careful about COVID and everybody pulling in together as a community, so much support to do that, to like lots of changes towards the end part of 2021. Still not a safe, just we're opening up. And I think in particular having the period over Christmas where it went from a lot of safety to no safety, but also no access to the PPE and rat testing and all the things. So that it was very hard to keep safe, I think. And then the whole thing with children returning to school in 2022 has raised such a big level of stress for, a lot of the families I work with, but me. And, people who are sort of vulnerable with coexisting health conditions, which I have, which so many of our community
I was going
have.
to say, so many of our community
And
have.
so I've been really scared on a personal level for myself, for one of my children who's immunocompromised. So many of our community is, and there's been such a lot of talk about, oh, well, it's okay because everybody who's dying, they've got pre-existing conditions. It's like, yeah, that's us. That's the disability community. So that's been hard.
It is hard, especially as we continue to fight for that place in the world where we are as equal and valid as anyone else. Yeah. And to feel disposable is a bit of a kick in the guts after such a difficult time.
Yeah. So I'm working on that myself as I'm supporting others through that.
Yes.
So it's really great to be able to kind of, I guess, talk with you today.
And we value that, Amanda. Thank you. And it's really, really powerful to have both that personal lived experience, but also, working with your clients. So I might jump to Shadia next. What did you want to share about maybe the last year and how you've gone through that?
I think I'm just feeling at the moment just overall fatigue and burnout. I think for me, the sort of constant change and transitions and having to adjust my routines, which I thrive on such a almost weekly basis, was really challenging. I guess it's really forced me in a way to prioritize self-care in a way that I've never done before, and really make sure that I am putting my mental health first. Got a wonderful occupational therapist who has helped me with executive functioning and organization, but even prioritizing energy. And she has helped me realize that pushing myself beyond my limits is not going to end well. For example, Mondays I have classes, and so we've put a boundary in the Tuesdays are nothing, no meetings, no appointments. That's recovery day. I have my first class this Monday and it's taken until today to recover from it. And many students have struggled with the return to on-site learning. And I guess for me, over COVID, it was a bit of a glimpse into flexible learning options. And I kind of feel a bit of a sense of loss that we're now back to on-site learning again. And I know that younger students are in the same boat too. As Amanda said, it's difficult when we've kind of had very strict rules in place, and now it's kind of just up to you. And I guess I've got a co-occurring health issue. That means that my breathing is affected. So I've been a bit worried about the COVID-19 situation for myself, but also for my friends and family members who are immunocompromised. I've found it very difficult transitioning back, knowing all those risks and knowing that a lot of my autistic friends also share that concern. I think for some people it's exciting returning back, but I think for people like myself, it's a lot of mixed feelings. I think being able to have to establish yet another new routine, I'm going, oh, I just got the other one perfectly organized, and I felt like I was getting into a rhythm, and all of a sudden it's changed again. And so I'm trying to take things slowly and as I said, really prioritize self-care. So not doing too many classes, trying to utilize online platforms as much as possible. And just I guess being able to go, what can I cope with today? Particularly the mask wearing is really challenging for me. So minimizing the place I have to wear it for long periods, or wearing a mask like a cloth mask that I find comfortable and more tolerable than the N95 ones, which make me feel so panicked and wanting to tear my skin off. So I've been trying to really honor myself and take care of myself. If COVID's taught us anything, is that mental health is the key to everything else, learning, functioning on a daily basis and thriving. So
that's really powerful, Shadia. Thank you for sharing it. And I do want to make sure I thank everyone for attending, because we know everyone's cup's so full, and being here today is another, take out of the cup. So I appreciate it. I do want to say how everyone has obviously struggled during COVID, but to remind anyone listening that in our neurodivergent community, our baselines were higher. So our baselines were higher before the pandemic than the typical community. And so, yes, everyone's probably experiencing an increase from what their base was, but our community has gone, say, from a 7 to a 10 at most times now. And that's why we're seeing so much crisis. So just to appreciate that level of intensity is really important. And I'm glad, Shadia, you've been adding more days in like that. I think that's really a beautiful way to model self-care. So Penny, I might jump to you. We spoke last year about how you were coping, and we talked a bit about plans, but how did you use any of those strategies? How's it going for you?
So when we consider the last year, I think we have to think back to what has happened to the pandemic over the last year, because we last spoke in February 2021, which was just after we'd had the short, sharp lockdown 3 that I found the best of the lot, because it was only 5 days. My parents were away, so they couldn't come over. They were hiking when it was announced. So lockdown 3, the pressure of returning to the office was taken off me for 5 days. And it was only 5 days. So it was a short, sharp breather, so to speak. But since February, we then had like 3 months of things going back to normal, and we made it to the second last day of semester 1 before lockdown number 4 was called. I have a really busy teaching load in semester 2. So what I found a challenge was the July-August period, because the people who lived next door to me, who share a massive wall with me, were doing renovations, and they weren't very good at communicating what they were doing. So literally, I was dreading the work week because I was on edge. I didn't know what noise was going to be happening. And B, because of my teaching commitments, you might remember lockdown 6, when it was announced, it was going to be a week or 7 days. Then it was extended by a week, 2 weeks, and then, the pandemic's changed. We're in it for the long haul. And it ended up being 77 days or 11 weeks. I found the period where it was week to week really difficult, because I was in the middle of teaching and we were trying to predict, will we be returning to campus for the EPI tutorials, or will we be remaining online? But at the beginning of September, once the messaging had changed, the COVID situation had changed, then it was like, okay, we're in it for the long haul again, just like 2020. Strap yourself in, work long hours, and just get it done. But we weren't having to try and predict anymore. But what also really helped was my teaching colleague, who has coordinated the big 800 student subject with me since 2015. In 2021, she returned. So she was taking the decision-making load. I found having colleague support back really useful.
Wow, yeah, Penny. I really felt that was really interesting how you compared the short, sharp lockdowns to the longer ones, and how that uncertainty versus, okay, let's strap ourselves in, at least I know what to expect, and how that really was different for you, and how you could respond.
Yeah, and on Amanda's point about politics, it just so happened in December, as the Omicron wave was taking off, that was when who was in charge of making decisions about the pandemic in Victoria changed from Professor Brett Sutton, the Chief Health Officer, to Minister Foley, who's the Minister for Health. I'll be honest, I considered not going to my family Christmas again. And the only reason why I went to my family Christmas was because I'd skipped the last year's. But I literally was checking the numbers every day.
Yeah, the trajectory would have been worrying, and yeah, I hear you. That's very powerful. You're very good with your numbers. I was just thinking, I don't remember anything about numbers and lockdowns. My brain just mushes it all together. It was just a hazy blur for me. So Shadia, you had a comment you wanted to make.
It was just when I was listening to Penny talking about the short, sharp lockdowns and everything, it reminded me, I really relate to that feeling of being on edge, particularly in the sort of latter half of 2021. That's right, one. See, time doesn't exist for me anymore.
Yeah.
I actually said to my mum the other day that when someone asked a question about my age, I said, "Oh yeah, I'm 18." She went, "No, you're not. You're 20." And I went,
I'm
"Oh
the
yeah,
same.
that's right." But I've just skipped 2 years of my life.
I'm the same, Shadia. I don't know if it's because I'm 40 and I'm like, I want to hold on to that 40, and I'm suddenly 43. Like, how did that
I'm nearly
happen?
50, guys. Come on. Time is meaningless.
Time is meaningless. The best
Time is
times that
meaningless.
now it feels even more of a blur for sure.
Yeah.
But I think too, when I came out of lockdown, I used to joke with my neurodivergent friends that I no longer had an excuse to go out, not to go out at nighttime. And then just thought, actually, why do I need to go to things that I find tiring? I just go no now. I just go, you know what? I don't want to.
Yes.
I'm not going to. It's given me that advocacy to just go, actually, I didn't enjoy that. And I masked a lot. And I like being able to just read a book at night or watch a funny movie and just, you know, de-stress from the week. So now I just go no. And it's great.
I love that it's given you that. And I guess that's one of the positives from this experience. And I'm sure there's many that you also mentioned about the online learning that we can take from and see that actually the world can be a bit more flexible if it wants to. Amanda, I might jump to you because we're going to go into a bit more of advice now, bringing it back to neurodivergent students as we're trying to support them through this time of uncertainty and their families. Is there something that advice you can give for parents to better reduce demands for their children? Because I feel like that's part of the solution, not having so many expectations on yourselves as parents, but for your children going through this time of uncertainty.
So we're in 2022 here. We're all going back to school for the first time, to the office for the first time. So we've got parents who have been having to be home to support their neurodivergent kids with their learning. And I guess my advice last time was to really accommodate that, to be very flexible with what that looked like for your individual autistic child. Not to just think that being able to do the standard home learning that the school was able to, put together, that would need a lot of accommodation for an autistic family, an autistic child. Now we're going back to school, and I guess my advice is the same, that the going back to school is going to need a lot of accommodation. It will look different, I think, for most autistic students because of the reasons, the same reasons, however, more. It's like, at least with the home learning, there was some sense of a reduced demand. I know that home learning did not suit everybody, but we could sort of work flexibly with what home learning looked like, and parents were allowed to be home, encouraged to be home, had to be home. And that was hard when you were working and supporting kids. However, workplaces were flexible, and often people could drop back their hours or work differently. Whereas now we've got sort of the two things happening at once. So we've got parents who are being required to go back to the office in many cases who don't have flexibility around the times that they're working, how they're working, and we've got the expectation that kids will be on site and that there isn't any more home learning being provided. Of course, schools can't do both. They can't. Like, I feel so much for educators, and Penny, I mean, it's great to have you here as an educator. I know you're educating young adults generally, but it's still that same insight that you cannot do both. However, as Shadia was saying, as a student, it's like having the flexibility to accommodate some home learning is so useful. It's not just about how the learning is presented, it's about being able to be in your own space, not to have to wear a uniform, not to have to be on show, not to have to deal with all the social aspects, just the time, the extra time you have to prepare, to get ready to learn, that you can take downtime when you need it and things like that. I just think that is not easily accommodated in an in-person environment. It doesn't feel the same.
It doesn't feel the same. And it's not just obviously the students, the young people in the household, it's changing, as you said, for everyone. So you've got into a routine, and we're seeing a lot of parents neuro questioning now. And so that dynamic shifting the family and getting used to having maybe a partner home that now is going back into the office, or yourself going back into the office. It's a shift for everyone. And that's where you get a lot of, competing needs as a family. And it's important to recognize that amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
And just quickly, I want to mention that before we jump to Shadia, that my own daughter's experiences going to mainstream education, unfortunately, we couldn't stay there. The expectations were too high during the pandemic. So I've had to pull them out of mainstream. And then we did 6 months of no schooling, unschooling, or just reducing completely all demands. And they've now gone into a community-based setting where the transition has been obviously still difficult, but there's no way they would have been able to, based on their trauma, go into a mainstream setting. They're able to wear what they want, like you said. If you want to wear an Audi to school, you can. That's the kind of safe environment it is. I wish there were more options like that for students. And it just hurts me to know how much masking is going on now, especially going from an unmasked situation like being at home to fitting in and trying to camouflage in the mainstream setting. And that's what today is, I guess, all about, is trying to provide that empowerment to our community, that we should be asking for these accommodations.
More specifically, because I know parents want specifics, which is that I would really suggest that for many students, starting back full time is not, it's not going to be good for your child. Not everybody, however, for many, like even just starting back, like if there's any kind of reservations about starting back, then I would be suggesting a graduated return to school with either shorter days, less days, and asking, for an accommodation in terms of the amount of work that is expected to be done, so that you're not just using those times away to just quickly be like trying to do all this extra work that you've missed out on. Missing out on work is a huge trigger for school refusal. When students feel that they need to do that work, that they need to know that work, that they haven't been able to know, then the anxiety that creates can be the trigger for just avoiding, and then just feeling like I can't go back now. It's too much. There's too much I've missed. And so having some arrangement in place with the school where this is recognized as a legitimate need for that student, and that may, I really do hope that anyone who does have an allied health professional that their child is linked in with, that allied health professional can support that, because having the backup of somebody else, if you don't have one, and I know that's been very hard to access during the pandemic, and so even having a disability advocate or speaking with somebody from the education department who works in the disability, and equal opportunity kind of.
We'll put links.
I'm probably not saying their right name.
No, we'll put links, Amanda.
I just feel like even if there's reasons why people have not been able to access support during the pandemic, and that has made mental health worse. It's made disability impact worse. And then going back to school, I mean, I feel like there is definitely more understanding from schools that this is a legitimate need. And I do, I think for teachers being home during the pandemic, like all of that, they're parents too.
Absolutely.
Teachers are people. Teachers have disability. Teachers have students with disability. So I feel that that's been really beneficial. And I just think we, as a community, just to not stop asking. Like, that's the worst thing we can do, is go back and lose all the things we've learned through the pandemic about how we can do things differently.
Yes, exactly. And now's the time to ask for it more than ever. And we need to encourage and support our community to have that access to the information, so it's fair and equitable for all, because we might be in a privileged space to know where to go, but not everyone is. So we need to encourage and support everyone.
I'm just going to say one more thing, then I'm going to shush. I cannot overemphasize the valuable resource that your general practitioner is to you and your child at this time. And I know that that can also be difficult to get a general practitioner who understands disability.
Internalized as well.
However, if you have got one, or if you can find one, I just think regardless, you as a parent, you as an individual, I would not give up. Like I would be seeking the support and just continually letting the GP know how this is impacting you, impacting the child, because a medical certificate for school is more powerful than you realize. And so a medical certificate can allow an attendance exemption during the final years of school in year 11 and 12, whatever that is called in your state. That is so important to access.
Good point.
But it can also recommend short days, less days, not having homework and things like that. And so if you don't have an allied health professional, use your GP, please do.
I'm glad you mentioned the no homework part, because Shadia did put it in the comments in our chat as we were going. And that is something that we should be entitled to ask for as an accommodation. If you think it's too much of an impact on your child's mental health, there's studies to say it's no benefit. If anything, with our community, as we know, coming home exhausted all day from school, homework is probably the last thing that our children need if they are internalizing so much. And I just want to say, back to the community school, no homework at all. And so that, when I see the difference between the expectation at prior schools versus no homework, and they are allowed to unravel their day in a way that allows them to give them the energy back so they can go again another day. They've been to school every day this year, and that is beyond a difference to what we've experienced the last 4 years. So just want to say thank you for bringing that up, Amanda and Shadia. And over to you, Shadia.
I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about is that, I think the neuro majority have gone back to saying we're back to normal. We're not going to be back to what it was before COVID. Our world has changed. It is still something I'm, I guess, grieving about, that the world that I lived in early 2020 is no longer there anymore. And I think it's okay to feel sad, confused, upset, angry, all of those emotions. I think it's okay to feel that way. And I've learned that, you know, just because other people don't experience it doesn't mean your own experiences are not valid. It is still taking me time to process the fact that we've gone back to school, but it feels different. You know, the whole energy of the world in general is different. And I guess from my perspective, I went to a school that didn't have homework either. And it really allowed me to tap into my autistic strengths with hyperfocusing. And I can tell you now, the young autistic people I meet have amazing knowledge in our areas of interest, you know, on a wide variety of topics. So I think that authentic home learning that taps into our interest-based learning and our passions is a much healthier way than telling us to do a worksheet that really studies have shown has a low effect size anyway for learning. So I think over COVID, I was able to do a lot of research and study into things that really interest me. And I've tried to incorporate that into my self-care practice now, giving me a lot of time to do interest-based learning that's just a time to info dump, or finding connections within the community where I have those safe spaces to just chat about what I find interesting. When I've been transitioning back, I've really pared down my subjects to ones that are not graded, that don't have a lot of group work involved, and that play to my strengths, because for me, I would rather take the time to get through the course at my own pace than push myself to a place where my mental health is compromised. So, and I guess as well, COVID has shown us there are possible ways of making reasonable and necessary adjustments that don't look the same for everyone. There might be other ways that you can demonstrate your skills that might not look like another person, but I don't think that matters. You know, I think what should be prioritized is, are we having authentic connections with people, and are we enjoying our learning? I think that's something that we should be focusing on at this point. And I just want to say to every young person out there, you know, the fact that you've made it through these 2 years, I think is worth celebrating.
Great message, Shadia. Thank you. And I just want to pick up on your point about energy. You know, a lot of neurodivergent people operate on an energy level and exchange. So we feel that shift in the energy of the world very deeply. I'm not sure if you all identify as being deep empaths. I know I am. And so it's not just COVID, it's what's going on in the world at the moment that's also weighing heavy on my heart so deeply that it's painful to, I know this sounds very like a privileged position, but it's too painful to sometimes read information on what's going on around the world, because it's so heavy, so deep. Like we feel it on all our levels. I don't know if I'm explaining that at all.
It's a cellular level.
Thank you. That's the word I was thinking, on a cellular level. It's really an impact. And sometimes it takes me 3-6 months later to work out what it is that I was feeling. And so I can hear, Shadia, you mentioned that, you know, still feeling it sometime after is perfectly fine, because we know sometimes it can take a while for us to recognize exactly what we're feeling and how we're feeling.
One of the things that I've learned when you feel pain is that I try and channel it in creative outlets. For example, drawing, or if you want to remember someone special, or, you know, you want to have a concrete way. I've made photo books and things like that of, you know, loved animals and people to remember them. And I think sometimes being able to channel it in ways that play to your strengths can be a form of self-regulation, and that might look different for everyone, but I kind of don't want to discount the power of being able to use your interests in positive, like in ways to help you regulate this situation. Because yes, the world at the moment is a very, very stressed place, but I think that there are ways of channeling it into whether it's advocacy or awareness building.
Yes.
You know, it all looks different.
I'm so glad you said that. I was about to say, you know, I just had a penny drop that possibly this advocacy work we're doing, penny drop,
Yeah.
penny, that, yes, I agree. I think it looks different for everyone, and it might not be a visual art piece that I create, but I like to create spaces where we can talk about this within our community. And I think that you're right. That's a way for me to regulate how I feel about things. So thank you for being part of that experience for me. Well, that leads us into, I guess, any advice you have for students, Penny. What's maybe one biggest bit of advice you'd like to give?
I am still working from home. Luckily, my semester 1 subject is always online, so I have a bit more flexibility. But I would say look at your week and work out when your various commitments are. I've got a handful of days that the best way of describing them are a Zoom test. And I find Zoom meetings, especially with my camera on, more exhausting than meetings where I can have my camera off and just be listening. But obviously, a panel discussion like this, no questions, you've got to have your video on and make sure you just have some downtime to recharge afterwards. Similarly, if I'm giving a live lecture to the 800 students, I need my camera on so they can see me. But if I'm attending the unit coordinators meeting with 40 people and it's mainly listening to other people talk about what's happening teaching-wise, I can have my camera off for that.
Yes.
But on a day where I do have lots of meetings, before the beginning of one meeting, I'll turn my washing machine on. The washing machine cycle lasts about an hour. So if I've got 10 minutes before the next meeting, well, setting the washing machine going, my washing machine has just beeped now. So you know what I'll be doing once this panel has finished? I will be hanging out my washing before doing anything else. So I will sometimes, if I have 3 hours of meetings for the day, sometimes all I will do at work that day from home is attend all of the meetings and do errands at home in between each of them. So I might do the washing up and stuff. But because I've broken up my work day and had those screen breaks, that means that on my official day off Friday, I might be able to do half a day's work that's in a chunk, because I find having to chop and change a bit difficult. So sometimes I might have an early dinner and work for 2 hours on something after dinner, because I know I can get on a roll with it.
That's a good point, and it actually leads us into the final question for today, because you know, executive functioning, it's not just about organising, it's working memory. There's a whole lot of things around that. I'll quickly say that I just wanted to say hello. This is Cinnamon. Cinnamon joined us during lockdown and has been such a beautiful, calming family member. And to help with my transition into work, Cinnamon comes into work every now and then. I'm lucky enough that we're a pet-friendly workplace, but Cinnamon has just...
Katie, I wanted to add to that there's actually an assistant cat in Australia now. So you might find that there are now assistant cats.
I love it. Oh, yes. And so I guess we're trying to think of creative ways to help with our transition back into the real world. The reason I thought of Cinnamon actually is that my husband's been home for 2 years and I've progressively done less and less around the house, luckily. And my just because of fatigue, and I've been focusing on supporting my own mental health and that my children's more. So that transition back into organising and being the one that has to think of what's for dinner or clean up is going to be really tricky for me. I've been really lucky the last 2 years, I must admit. But even my children, I guess, how can we support students or ourselves with executive functioning, considering how tired our brains are at the moment? I know, Penny, you just talked about the washing machine idea. Jump to Amanda, Shadia, and then we'll finish off with you, Penny. Is there anything that you do, Amanda, that helps you with your things to do?
Firstly, I do take my medication. So I am formally diagnosed with ADHD, and I do have a an ADHD specialist prescribing that for me. So I'm just saying that because it's like, it is really important to get that monitored. It's not for everyone. For me, that's a tool that is, I guess it really taught me though, how much of the problems that I do have were biologically based. They are not something that I can control. Like, I can't change the way I am. This is a tool that helps me explain things better sometimes. Regulating your nervous system. So I've got these little buzzy kind of things at the moment that are helping regulate my nervous system, because I think being able to focus and plan and attend to all the steps involved in tasks, that requires you to be quite calm in terms of your nervous system calm. Doesn't mean outside calm. So that might look like wriggling around a lot. I have been trying to wriggle, except we're all on a thing. So I know that's distracting for a lot of people, but I need to wriggle. That is actually regulating my nervous system, and therefore I am able to do things better. So what that looks like, I guess, for students is being able to move freely. How do they do that in a class where it's not welcome or something? I think it's about the teacher making that normal for everybody. Everybody has a nervous system. Everybody has been home for 2 years, basically. You're in Melbourne, but, metaphorically. And so I think to make this not an autistic thing, to make this just a human thing, normalize movement, just make it acceptable. Just like, if you just need to get up and, move around, stretch, sit on the floor to work, whatever it is, make that normal, because that will help. We are very, we neurodivergent folk, we do require a lot of physical accommodations, which will help us to then be able to do all the things. And I guess executive functioning is like so, it can be really vague to describe. I hate vague, but it is really the parts of the brain that help us as humans to plan things, to organize things, to remember things, to tackle a new task, look at the new task, understand it, break it down into all the steps, and then plan all the steps, and then get all the resources we need to be able to do all the steps, and then to start doing them. Now, autism and ADHD and neurodivergence in general, that affects executive functioning as that is our major disability. And so that is just, it's very hard to understand. I think people who are not neurodivergent often think of it as, well, we'll just get this organization, we'll get this diary, we'll get this organization, let's plan some time. But as Penny touched on, another part of our experience, like just the way our brains, the way our whole system works, is that we work in bursts that are interest-based. And so to be able to do something which is not interest-based, which a lot of work and school and cleaning and cooking and organizational tasks are not our interest. Number one, it's so hard to get ourselves to do those things because we have an interest-based learning system, then we need so much to prepare ourselves to be like regulated and to have done all that stuff first and to build up to even doing it, that often then we're exhausted and burnt out. So we sort of need all that time, all that extra time, which is thinking about it, planning for it, regulating our system. And that is incorrectly labeled as procrastination.
Yep,
it's not
absolutely.
procrastination. Yeah. It is what we need to do. That is that's part of the disability. It's a social disability that is because that's the way our workplaces and our schools work and our lives work, our society. We can't change everything in those spaces, but we do need to understand it, and things that can help are just recognizing that those things take an inordinate amount of more time, and just expecting us to make our brains work in a different way we cannot do it. Like, you cannot do it.
Yeah.
We can't get off the invisible wheelchair and start walking,
Exactly. And just because it's hidden doesn't mean it's not there. And just because
we will need like time. The time it takes to actually get into the mode of doing these things is really a long time. And so if we don't have that time, it's not possible. Like, the amount of times I've been told, just do a little bit here. You got 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. That is not the way our brains work. We cannot do that.
That's amazing.
I don't know if that helps.
No, that did help. And I like how you said that schools could approach this across the board for everyone, to make it normalized, to talk about this, not to single people out. And I will say that I talked about the community school my daughters go to. We just got a letter yesterday saying that they've noticed a lot of people struggling with their mental health, and they're going to introduce more art therapy for everyone.
Perfect.
Everyone. It was just amazing. And the other thing they did, and the teacher sent me an email, was, we are noticing that your daughter loves pink and is engaged when writing in pink. So now we print off their worksheets in pink. Like, how incredible is that? My daughter's got that. Yes. Shadia, we might jump to you with your final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess one of the biggest concepts that, my mum's a secondary school teacher and autistic, so I've benefited from hearing her over the years and advocate with that dual experience. But one of the biggest concepts we've talked about is the idea of universal design for learning. The whole idea that all these strategies will help every student. It's not going to disadvantage any student. It's going to help every student. And I think that that's a really powerful thing to think about. One of my favorite resources is for energy regulation is Autism Level Up's free resources online. And that's autistic led, and they've done a lot of work on revising and evolving over time. And I think something that was really powerful for me to realize is that all our regulation systems are linked. So if my sensory regulation is out, is not in sync, it's going to affect how I can manage my emotional state, my energy state, my cognitive state. So it's all connected. And so if we don't have support for the sensory and the emotional, then I can't access my cognitive regulation. I think one of the things that I've tried to do in my daily life is try and utilize my strengths with hyper focusing. So I'll have specific days where for example, on the weekends, I usually schedule Saturdays for cleanup days. So that's when I'll do housework, or I will go through my files on my computer, or those sorts of tasks I usually forget to do during the week. I tend not to study or do anything after class. So, I might get a pre-made meal or have something cooked for that night, so then I'm not having to have additional cognitive load and having to think ahead and then plan to cook and do things when I get home. And then the next day might be dedicated to study. Another thing that I found really helpful in my regulation is utilizing movement through exercise and walking in nature. I was able to sign up to an online fitness program over 2 years ago now, and that has been amazing for my self-regulation. I couldn't believe how much I could focus after just actually doing physical activity. When I'm talking about something I'm passionate about, I will circle the whole room just walking and talking, and that's we've embraced it as a household. We have tubs of fidget tools that we use that we've now deliberately put on the table and where we are, in the couch area. So then we have access to those. Sometimes I forget to use them in the first place, so I have to have visual cues. So those are some of the things I guess I've learned to kind of do. And I think it is also playing into whatever strength of modality that you learn in. So I'm a very visual learner. I thrive on visual schedules. One of the ways that I've organized my cupboard is having photos of what's in the tub or whatever I need, so I can remember what's in it, and then know how to keep it tidy, because that's something that I find really difficult. That won't work for everyone. I know that a lot of autistic people are visual, but then I know a lot of my friends are very verbal based learners. So you can't make the assumption that that's going to work for everyone. And it's okay to trial a few things and go, you know what, this doesn't work. That's fine. Try something else.
Yeah, it's a good time to try and work out what does work for you. But no, that's really good points. I really like the specifics of that, Shadia. Thank you so much. We are short. We're nearly towards the end. We'll do final thoughts with Penny. You wanted to talk a little bit about the COVID plan.
So on Amanda's point about making stuff accessible to the classroom, one of my autistic friends who's a teacher, she has a tub of fidget toys in her classroom, just that anyone can grab a fidget if they need to. So I've got this tub of fidgets that goes underneath the stand that my laptop sits on. So if I want to get, for instance, the little caterpillar that clips onto my hoodie, I can grab that, or I can grab the wheel or whatever. So they're accessible to me on my table. And now all of us are getting our
let's all pull out our
fidgets. All get out all our things.
Yeah, but was that part of your plan, Penny, like to make sure you had access to this during the lockdown and beyond?
In the last discussion, Amanda was saying about having a lockdown plan, because we were all finding that when a lockdown was announced, we all found it difficult to adjust. Yeah. But that was when we had very few number of cases, so we were very much of the attitude of avoid COVID. Yeah. But now, because even though numbers have gone down, there are lots of people who are getting COVID. So unfortunately now I feel that we need a plan of what to do if we get exposed and what to do if we unfortunately get COVID.
It was so good when Amanda mentioned that lockdown plan. I think that helped a lot of us come up with one way at least that we can put some sort of controls in an uncontrollable situation. So if we get COVID or our children get COVID, maybe thinking about some things you can do at home as a family, like we're going to watch we don't talk about Bruno movie. What's that?
Encanto.
And yes, that movie, for example, is a family favorite. But I've said if we go into lockdown, we are watching that on repeat.
Yes.
Because it gives them something to think of, that even if it's an uncertain period, I know for certainty we are going to do this.
Yes.
I think for me as well, writing down things like what I can immediately control in my own environment versus this is what's happening in the world. I can't control what's going to happen, but this is what I can do when or if it happens. I think seeing that in writing and then going, right, I've got my fidgets, I've got my interests, I can watch my favorite film a million times if I need to. I can listen to the same song that I love, sometimes 10 times in a row. Whatever I need to do to regulate, I've got that always with me. Another thing that I find helpful is particularly if you like, I don't know, your pet cat and you can't take it into school with you. Something that you could do is put photos and videos on your phone. So then if I'm stressed, I'm in class, I just flick through animal videos, and that can help me feel a sense of familiarity in an environment where you don't necessarily always have control. But I thought I'd just expand on that.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So and having that even written down somewhere, so that if your brain is, like you said, the cognitive load's too much and you're exhausted, you can maybe see some pictures.
Yeah. And don't feel worried about don't feel worried. Nobody who was ever told not to be worried has ever been not worried in the history of not being worried. What I mean is embrace the shortcuts.
Yeah.
Try to embrace them, because things like having a ready-made meal, or if you are privileged enough to live somewhere where you have delivery options, the supermarkets these days have really amazing I'm saying this again in a metropolitan area of Melbourne with privilege, but I know that there have been many of the restaurants have started, like during the lockdowns, made amazing like meals that you could take away and things that, which just those shortcuts are fantastic in our everyday life. But when we've like having some of that stored up, actually, like having this sort of almost like, if you have to isolate now, or if you do get COVID now, having a bit of a cheat sheet of particular things that others have found useful in the community, or opening a forum on the Yellow Ladybugs Facebook page that specifically like tips.
We can do that. We can do that.
Yeah. Useful. And then collating some of that into something brief, like what you've done before.
No, that's a good point. Anyone in Australia can join our local closed private groups, and we'll create a thread that people can put their comments and experiences of what helped. And I think that shortcuts is a great idea, and also radical acceptance. We spoke about that at our last conference, to support mental health, and radically accepting the situation, knowing, not putting that extra pressure on yourself. And I know some of you are speaking at our next conference, and it's all about the autistic ADHD experience and executive functioning. So hopefully you can all tune into that one as well, because we'll probably touch on lots of this shortcut ideas and radical acceptance and all the amazing tips you've given today. I'm just so grateful for your time. I hope that each of you do something to recover after our chat today. And thank you everyone for listening at home. We'll have this up soon, so you can either watch it online, or hopefully if you haven't tuned into our podcast as well, make sure you check that out. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure. Thank you, Katie.